So you putting the flag up that way. The top part first. Huh. "2024 is the most important election year of our lives. But in Kalamazoo County, democracy isn't once in a lifetime. It's an everyday effort by ordinary people like you to improve the well-being of our communities, our loved ones, and ourselves."
Hi, I'm Dakota Shapiro, and welcome to the Inside Kalamazoo podcast. In this podcast, we like to discuss some of our most pressing local issues affecting Kalamazoo and ways that all of us can make a difference. Today, we'll be talking with Justin Mendoza, chair of the Kalamazoo County Democratic Party, to address the stakes of the upcoming election and ways you can get involved. So I really want to start with what is a Democrat? What does that mean? It's a political party, obviously, in the zeitgeist of our country, but what is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think a Democrat starts with a simple value. And it starts with, who do you think should have a voice in our society? And if your answer is everyone who lives around you, everyone you've ever met, everyone who has a perspective in society in America, then you're a Democrat. And that's as simple as it gets, because our core value is in our name, democratic values, which means that we believe that the collective should make decisions together. We should be able to come together and decide what is the right budget for a road, what is the right healthcare system that we should live within, what is the right economic system we should live within, and that people should be the driving force behind that, because a democracy is made up of people. And if you believe that, you're a Democrat.
Interesting. So I'd be interested to, and I'm going to ask you this, to contrast that with the Republicans. Now, so Democrats are democratic values. The Republicans, going off the name, they are based on Republican values of values of that of a republic, I would assume. Can you unmuddy that for me?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I would say that this isn't true necessarily of the way that the parties talk about themselves today. But if we go back to really the origin, the idea of a republic is that only a certain class of individuals, folks who were educated enough, elite enough to make the decisions on behalf of those who they represent, could have the privilege of doing that. They were the only ones who would have the ability to make the decision on behalf of, say, 10,000 people in an area. Okay. And of course, the American political system is a democratic republic. So we work in a system where individuals are elected in order to fulfill the position of essentially a republic, where elected officials make those decisions on behalf of their base. But the difference between the two parties is we believe that you should really listen to those individuals. The Republican Party believes that you should listen to the elected officials.
That's an interesting distinction. So that's more of like the everyday person, from the lowest in the sense of like socioeconomic status,
right,
to the highest. Everyone has an equal voice, as opposed to just the politicians. They're the ones who we listen to. So that's am I getting it?
I think so, and that's reflected in our bylaws. The Michigan Democratic Party, the Kalamazoo County Democratic Party, we're all beholden to bylaws that actually say that as long as you're a member of the party, you can propose a policy. You can propose a resolution. You can propose how the party should act, or what we should do, how we endorse candidates, who we endorse, how we spend our money, what policies we talk about on the internet. You can propose all of that, and it can be voted on by a majority of your colleagues. So if the room agrees with you, if the members of the Democratic Party agree that we should do something, for instance, calling for a ceasefire, which the Michigan Democratic Party has done.
That's right.
We've officially, as the Michigan Democratic Party, called for a ceasefire and a peaceful resolution between Israel and the people of Palestine. And we've called upon the Biden administration to deliver on a peaceful resolution. And that is the official policy of the Michigan Democratic Party, and that was decided through democratic process, through literally asking our members, what do you want done? when it comes to policy here, and what proposal do you have, and then voting and deciding across the entire state party about how we should express that opinion across the board. We also call for the release of hostages.
Sure.
We call for a total peaceful resolution in the region.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's very bottom up. Like that's the approach.
That's the
right?
approach.
Right.
That's what differentiates us most from the Republican Party.
But they're not bottom up. They're more top down.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right. And that comes down to, even not to get super nerdy, but I love to get nerdy.
Please get nerdy.
But it even comes
This is
down.
pretty nerdy. What
It's
we're
super
doing.
nerdy. We're
So
jumping
please
right in.
go on.
Yeah. Yeah, but like to jump right in, I mean, the Republican Party, even at the local level, the only people with a voice in the entire party are people who are elected as precinct delegates or elected to office. So they have to get the votes of all of the registered Republicans in their county, in their precinct, which is the smallest possible unit of measure for voters in the American system. They will literally wait until those people are elected on a public ballot before they give them a voice within the Republican Party.
Within the local. Like,
Within the local Republican Party.
Interesting. So you bring up this concept of a precinct delegate.
Right.
What their precinct delegate. So one, kind of dive into what that is a little more, and you sort of explain, and especially more what a precinct is. I know some people don't understand that. I personally have a hard time understanding
Totally.
where things begin and end in the regional, like, what are those called, districts? How the things are drawn.
Right.
So what are our precinct delegates? What do they do? If because I know from experience in the party that I didn't need to be a precinct delegate to have a voice.
Right.
So what's the distinction there? What do ours do compared to theirs?
Yeah. For us, precinct delegates are ambassadors for democracy. Okay. They're the people who should be able to talk to their neighbors, to their friends, to their communities, and bring them into an understanding that we all deserve to have a voice. I mean, ultimately, that is the core principle of the Democratic Party. And so that's really what their duty is, what their job is. And I will say, the precinct itself, it's the smallest unit of measure that we use, which is so technical already, but it's the number of streets and neighborhoods and communities that we put together on an election map.
Okay.
So it's when everything boils down and we count the number of votes anywhere for any position, the precinct is the smallest division. And it's usually your neighborhood. It's usually a few streets around you. I live in
Is that small?
It's usually small, yeah.
Wow.
I live in Parchment, and in Parchment we have one precinct. So it's the entire
really?
city of Parchment.
Wow.
But the entire city of Parchment is 1,800 voters.
Okay. Oh, really?
Right.
I did not know that about Parchment.
So it's a small number of registered voters. And so when you look at that and you go, well, that's a precinct, that's fine.
Okay.
And so the point of a precinct delegate is to be able to reach out to every corner of that precinct, to talk to the community, to get to know your neighbors, and to literally spread to them the idea that they deserve a voice in our governance, in our political system. And that's what a Democratic precinct delegate does. A Republican precinct delegate instead gets to make decisions for that entire community.
Really? So I imagine the precinct then votes for that precinct delegate.
Right.
And then that person is in charge of making decisions for them.
Correct. At least at the party level.
Okay.
So that person then gets to decide what are the rules of the Republican Party. How much do they invest in candidates? Which candidates do they invest in? Who gets to have a voice at the Republican Party?
Wait.
All of that is decided by those people who are elected. And my main point on that is really, your question isn't unusual. Most Americans don't know what a precinct is.
Wow.
So if you have a system that's designed so that no one understands what it is that they're voting for and who represents them at the most core level, and then you give the power to only those people who represent people at that most core level, do you truly have a system that represents anyone? Or do you have a system that's designed around the power and the money that exists in the Republican Party, which is exactly what they have?
That brings a question now to me. Can you is the only way to become a member of the Republican Party is that to be like, say, like we have a county committee and anyone can become a county committee member if they're nominated and they'll go through that process. Do you have to be a precinct delegate to be a member of the Republicans?
You don't. They do also allow their elected officials to be county committee members. So if you run for a higher office than precinct delegate, because it is an elected office, every office above that is also a member of the county committee, which is also true for us. However, we also let regular people who represent values and who want to have a voice in our process become members who have a vote and an ability to move and shape how we act. And the Republican Party does not allow that.
That's crazy. I never understood that. Like, that is crazy to me.
Yeah.
I always thought, like, you could just walk into the Republican headquarters and be like, hey, I want to be a member. The same way that I literally just walked into the Dems and asked to be a member.
Right.
Like, that's insane to me.
Right. And in fact, I mean, if I was going to boil it down to too simple, I would say that the fundamental issue at the core of the difference between the two parties comes down to exactly this.
Wow.
Because for us, we literally want anyone who comes in off the street who says, I have an idea. I want my system to work so that my neighborhood has X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Or I want to make sure that my people are protected from, anything that could possibly happen. Or I want to make sure that my community has religious freedom or protections or something else. We make sure that they have a voice at the table, because all you have to do is what you just said. You come to the party, you say, I want to be a member. You ask permission to become a member. And maybe 30 days later, we vote on whether or not you become an official member. And that's it. And you're in.
Wow.
Versus the Republican Party, where you actually have to run for
You have
office
to win an election
to be able to have a voice in that room, other than talking. But as we know, when it comes down to decision making with a large group, the vote is what makes the decision.
Right. Well, that makes a lot. That makes a lot of sense in that, like, it's clear, like, the earlier comparison that we went through of when you compared Democrats to Republicans about, like, the elected officials are the ones who are in charge versus the people.
Right.
Like, this really, it's right there.
It's right there.
In just plain.
It's in black and white.
It's black and white.
Yeah.
But people, I didn't know this. And
Right.
I think a lot of people don't know this. That's
Absolutely.
wow. That's a lot to wrap my mind around, and I'd love to pick your brain more, but I do have other questions
Anytime.
that I have to get through. Some of which you almost answered for me. Without having to answer them or ask them. So what I am going to ask then is, what is the Kalamazoo County Dems right now doing for their community, doing for the county? What's going on? What are we up to?
Absolutely. I mean, so we're doing a few things, right? So first of all, Kalamazoo County Democrats, because we represent real members of the community, not necessarily elected officials, but just people.
Yeah.
We're doing a ton. Right. So the Kalamazoo County Democrats just organized 25 volunteers to help out with Pride Festival, which is going on literally next weekend, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Yes,
in early
it is.
June. Here in Kalamazoo, June 7th and 8th.
Nice.
And we're going to be helping out from registration tables to set up and tear down to selling beers at the beer tent.
Awesome.
Whatever is needed by community partners so that they can help celebrate Pride. We're going to do the same thing for the Black Arts Festival. We're going to do the same thing for the Latinx Festival in the fall. We show up and deliver on things that are asked for in the community. In fact, we recently faced a tragedy, right? In Portage, Texas Township
Right.
Pavilion,
Yep.
we had a massive tornado come in. The first one in
40
years.
4 years, yeah. The last one was downtown Kalamazoo. Crazy, by the
Crazy.
way. Well,
Absolutely
I
crazy.
didn't even believe it, right?
Right.
That was so crazy.
Yeah, I was literally buying a guitar from someone on
you
Facebook
really?
Marketplace as the tornado hit, and I didn't believe the alert at first, so then we both were like, wait, we gotta stop.
I
And
know.
I threw cash down, took the guitar, it works great.
I got
It's
the
fine.
alerts. I thought it was so benign because we get this stuff all the time. Tornado warnings. It doesn't matter.
Right.
No, my only concern was I hope the power doesn't go out so I can finish making my dinner.
That's right.
That's all I cared
That's
about.
right.
So
Yeah. But in reality though, like in reaction to that, we weren't leading the response, we weren't pushing the strongest response ever. But the Kalamazoo County Dems, we did organize a quick donation drive. We responded within 24 hours. We loaded up a
Nice.
truck and a SUV. Not that much. It's not like we had barrels upon
Sure.
barrels, but we
because
loaded
you're
up
all volunteers, right?
We're all volunteers.
Yeah.
So we loaded up a truck and SUV. We delivered those to Pavilion Estates, which was one of the places most hardest hit by the tornado. And although this isn't the point, I will point out that Pavilion Estates lands in a very Republican part of the district. It's not an area where it's like, oh, there's a bunch of Democrats, so let's serve it. Instead, we just served the community that needed it most.
Yeah.
And that was the point, and really just trying to help provide resources. And honestly, we didn't take credit. If you look through our social media right now, you're not going to see a single post that's like, we delivered a bunch of things to Pavilion Estates with an account of what we delivered. We just did it.
Right.
And that's what Democrats actually do in the Kalamazoo County Party. We just quietly get shit done across the board. And then if we extend that up, what else do we do? Of course, we elect folks. We elect folks who we believe would do the same thing. We elect Governor Whitmer because Governor Whitmer, in response to that tornado, immediately enabled emergency authorization for funds and resources that are coming down now to the communities that are affected. Because our county commissioners and state representatives who are Democrats who are over those areas, with the exception of Pavilion again, they went on the ground, met with community members. Our sheriff hosted community events within 24 hours of the tornado.
That's amazing
just
turnaround.
To hear. Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Amazing turnaround.
That's what Democrats are about. We're about delivering at the community level, having the conversation and moving things through. And, this is me as the Democratic Party chair just saying the contrast to that is Matt Hall, Republican representative who represents literally Pavilion Estates. All he did was fly around in a helicopter and look at the damage from above.
He flew around in a helicopter. Where did you get a helicopter from?
Oh, well, there are helicopters available to government officials, and it's paid for with taxpayer dollars.
Is that?
However, of course.
Well, we can get off on a tangent there.
We could.
That might get my blood boiling.
But he used his moment in the aftermath of a horrific tragedy that hasn't happened in over 40 years in the county and flew around the community to look at it and say, whoa, this damage is wild.
And that's
Compare that to State Representative Christine Morse in the 40th State House District, right next door to his, who actually showed up at the community centers, actually talked with constituents, and actually heard what people are dealing with, and then demanded that the state do as much as it can in terms of emergency relief. It's a night and day contrast, and it's probably because we represent real people.
Right. Well, it's easy. We make it so easy to represent because we are regular people. Right. We walked, like I said earlier, I just walked in. The people helping run this podcast walked in and just did it. And there was no barrier. And it's awesome.
Absolutely.
That's awesome
Absolutely.
to hear. So that's some cool stuff happening in our the tornado is not cool. But what we did, what the party did.
Right.
And other people who were Democrats but not so much affiliated with the party.
Yeah.
Is amazing.
Absolutely.
These are our people, and that's really heartwarming to hear. So, why join the party officially? Why should someone, say they vote liberal, they're a liberal person, they always vote Democrat. Why should they join the party as opposed to staying hands off?
Yeah, there are probably many reasons to join, right? Like one reason, if you want to run for office, if you think you'd be an elected official that could do good things in the community, of course. Joining a political party, joining us, because we'll empower you instead of tearing you down, is a great way to start. However, I would actually say that if you've ever looked at a national election, a statewide election, or any other election, and gone, man, I just feel like I'm voting between the lesser of two evils. If you've ever felt like the people who are elected into office don't represent you. If you've ever felt like you've never seen yourself in elected office. And I say that as someone who is Latino. I grew up here in Otsego, not too far north of us, but my father's from the Dominican Republic, right? And so growing up seeing almost no elected officials who are Latino, and none who have ever come from our area in the state, joining the Democratic Party is because it's the only option for you to maybe see someone who represents you and your community elected into office. The reason you should join is because we will actively try to empower your voice. And when you find a group that's willing to empower you, a group that's willing to work with you, a group that's willing to listen to you, that's the group you join. You don't join the groups that have no interest, the groups that hold on to their power, the groups that tell you that you're wrong.
Color me a little biased as a Democrat myself, but it's very heartwarming. It's very motivating. So let's tie that up with a why vote Democratic, but specifically, what is at stake in the 2024 election for those who have the same values as us Democrats?
Totally. So the first question, I mean, I like to answer it the same way Pete Buttigieg, I'm pretty sure, answered it, who's now a Michigander, so he gets an extra quote for that. But Pete Buttigieg pointed out, and I think it was in 2020, that when it comes to politics, especially at the presidential level, this isn't Uber. This isn't your own personal vehicle. This is public transportation. You should hop on board with the bus that's going to get you as close as you can to your values. And the questions are, is it the guy who just got convicted of 34 felonies for running a business illegally in the state of New York, who has decimated our economy, who worked incredibly hard to make sure that people who look like me are not welcome in this country, and who has made sure to fight back against the rights of people and completely bungled a response to a pandemic?
Wow.
Or is it the person who has worked hard to recover the economy, has worked incredibly hard to deliver on things like prescription drug prices, lowering prescription drug prices, has worked incredibly hard to represent unions and labor and workers' rights in a way that a president hasn't done in at least 40 years, and has truly represented a lot of the broad values that really matter to a majority of voters across this country? And if the answer to that is that you would like to vote for the latter, the person who's done those things, then the only answer is to vote Democratic this year. And the reason is that if we see a split state or a split Senate and a split House, or if we don't see President Biden back in office, we can't move forward on any of those agendas. We can't move forward on things that affect our real families at home. Instead, we'll see a divisive country. We'll see the same things that we saw in 2018, 2019, and early 2020 before that election took place. We'll see January 6th repeat itself. So number one reason to vote Democratic is to make sure that you have a chance at having your values represented in the future. I go further because to me, as someone who is bought in, who believes that Democratic elected officials are better than the bottom of our possible values, I believe that the reason to vote Democratic is because I believe in a future where people can actually live their lives in a way that matters, that folks can have an opportunity to grow their families if they want to, where we can get to a point where we aren't destroying the environment with every massive corporate purchase or decision that's made, where we can finally regulate prescription drug prices at a point that saves people money. I believe in a future where my nephew with type 1 diabetes isn't completely dependent on an employer when he turns 26 to have health insurance. And the only way we get anywhere closer to that is by voting Democratic. The Republican Party doesn't give a shit about any of those values or any of those pieces, because their only priority as a party is to make sure that those who are elected into office as Republicans stay elected into office as Republicans. And that goes all the way down to the local level of their members, all the way to the precinct level.
All the way to the I guess from what you told me earlier, that makes sense, right? If they have that starting power, this initial one, and that would compel. I mean, you know, you hear the old saying, "Power corrupts." I mean, I imagine that would compel anyone,
absolutely,
in that position to do that. So I have a curious. So it seems pretty daunting a task as us voters, as Democratic voters, to keep the Senate and the White House and obtain again the House of Representatives.
Right.
Is there a possibility, like, can we afford to lose any of them? Or is it really dire that we keep them all?
We need to keep them all. And the reason I say that is because what we've seen in the House of Representatives with the Republican Party now, we've set a new low bar for what regulates our Speaker of the House. Right? I mean, the fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I will openly say direct to camera is America's biggest idiot, Marjorie Taylor Greene has the ability to potentially oust a Speaker of the House who she disagrees with on over like general ideas like passing a budget so the government does not shut down.
Right. And she submitted her the paperwork to do so.
Exactly.
Already, which is insane.
It's insane.
We've already lost one. I mean,
right. I mean, not that we loved him.
Yeah, but it's like, what a waste of our time.
Exactly. But the fact that we can't even get to process working. This has been the least productive Congress in the history of the United States. Actually, I can't back that up fully. At least in my lifetime, this has been the least productive Congress that we've ever seen. And that comes down to adopting rules that give a very small minority in the U.S. House of Representatives the ability to oust a speaker anytime they disagree. It takes one person to introduce articles and 2 of them to vote on it. This is ridiculous. And only the Republican Party, the current Republican Party, I won't even say anything historical, but the current Republican Party, they're the ones who allowed these rules in place and broke the U.S. House of Representatives. And unless we elect a Democratic majority in the U.S. House, we can't offset that. We'll deal with the same rules because this is their precedent now. Rather than compromise, rather than come to bipartisan solutions, they would rather toss out the entire process of passing any basic legislation than work across the aisle. And that can't stand. So we have to elect every Democrat we can to the U.S. House of Representatives, which means here we have to elect, of course, Jessica Swartz to the 4th Congressional District in the north half of our county. And in the southern half, we all need to vote for Libby Urban, who is running against Tim Walberg. And those races matter so much right now because if either one of them can pull it through, if we can battle for other seats across the state to hold on to Democratic seats, to outperform Republicans, we can make sure that the U.S. House of Representatives works in a rational way.
Right.
I will take the Republican-controlled House of Representatives from the 90s as a rational way to establish versus what's happening today, where it's about pure partisan politics and policy that have nothing to do with what the American people deserve in our elected officials.
Before I move on to my final question, I have an interject question.
Yeah.
Why do you think the Republicans are this way now? Is it Donald Trump? Is that who has made it this way?
It's a great question. No, I think it starts with Reagan. But, and I don't mean that as a cop-out because everyone says it starts with Reagan. Reagan's the first celebrity elected into office. Reagan changes the way that we tax the rich and completely changes our tax code from 92%, from a tax bracket that was a 92% tax on the wealthiest Americans down to one where Joe Biden set a new precedent by increasing the tax bracket for the wealthiest Americans up to, I think it's 32%. Wow. So we're talking about a 60% gap just from Reagan to now, and that took a tremendous amount of courage and a Democratic trifecta in 2020 to deliver on, right? Reagan started that policy. Reagan also pushed back against workers by fighting back against unions, doing for the first time union busting at the government level, at the federal level, which then gave corporations carte blanche or just complete freedom to bust up unions at the local level.
Union busting in the government.
Absolutely.
Like the one place you would not expect that behavior.
The one place you wouldn't.
That's
Ronald Reagan went to war essentially with the air traffic controllers and busted a major union effort and a major bargaining effort, and that gave complete freedom to massive wealthy corporations to push back on unionization and workers' rights. So today's issues, when it comes to not getting paid enough, when it comes to going to the grocery store and seeing the prices higher than what you expected for your family, when it comes to seeing your rent way too high, when it comes to seeing gas prices higher than you want, when it comes to trying to purchase a new or used car and seeing them $20,000 higher than they would have been a decade ago, every single one of those issues falls back on the fact that the Republican Party has elected leaders like Ronald Reagan who pushed this ideal that corporations and those with massive wealth in our country should have the ability to set the tone for what the rest of us have to deal with and weakened the power of families all across this nation. And unfortunately, that policy also birthed Donald Trump. Because when you tell everyone who has been left behind by those policies that the problem is really Barack Obama, America's first black president, and Bill Clinton, America's kind of most moderate Democrat, are the real problems that led to it. And when you singly control Fox News and a few other media sources, including our local media here in Kalamazoo County, with highly conservative bent billionaires, you end up in a space where the only reality that most people recognize when they spend 3 minutes focusing on an election, which is the national average, is that
it's very short.
It's very short.
It's very short.
In those 3 minutes, the thing that they recognize is that things aren't working for their family, things aren't working for them right now.
And they've been given someone to blame.
And they've been giving someone to blame. And the only possible solution is X, Y, and Z from the past. And the conservative view ends up being the thing that is projected into their households.
It's starting to stress me out a bit. It's starting to stress me out just a little bit. But it's really solidifying me the importance of this election.
That's right.
More than I think I had coming into it. And so that leads me to our final question here is, what can I do and what can our viewers do out there?
Right.
What can they do to help the party and advance our values, but make sure that we keep this ball going with Joe Biden and with the Democrats in the Senate and then taking back the House? What can we all do?
Absolutely. You only have to do one thing this election cycle. Literally just one. You need to do one thing that pushes you outside of your comfort zone. Now, me, I've ran for office. I've been the chair of a local party, right? I've called thousands of voters. I've knocked thousands of doors. I've donated money to candidates. I've donated money to political action committees. I've done all that kind of stuff. So for me to push outside of that limit, it takes one more thing. Things like doing a podcast, having these conversations, and just being really honest with folks about what is actually at stake, because it's not the BS we see on MSNBC or Fox News.
Sure.
It's actually things that affect our families that are at stake. It's the ability to afford college for the next generation.
Right.
It's the ability to have 2 generations from now because climate change exists and is real. It's the ability to talk about and understand that the difference between the chance to practice whatever religion you would like and whatever religion the state likes comes down to this election. It's those things that are critical and are just so important for us to tell the truth about and put out there in stark terms. But that's me pushing my boundary. Other people, if your boundary might be that you've never talked to your mother about politics, talk to them this year. If your boundary is that you've never called a single voter, call them this year. Join a phone bank. If you're in Kalamazoo County, come down here. Tuesday nights, we'll probably start phone banking with our congressional candidates just to get the word out, to try to make sure that we can elect folks who represent our values and represent our community well to office. You can take a couple of minutes and hop on social media and tell your friends and family why you believe that voting for Democrats this year is important. You can take just a couple of seconds to question your aunt or uncle at a family dinner who makes a comment about how Donald Trump did something good and just really understand where they're coming from.
Right.
And if you're already at that level, I need you to knock doors. We have to reach voters who don't like to answer their phones, who throw away the mail when they get it. You need to knock doors, and you can do that with the Kalamazoo County Democratic Party, with the Michigan One campaign, which is our single campaign that is working from Joe Biden down to the county commission level. And you can work to really help voters connect to those folks who are running for office because they care about what actually affects our families. And only with that level of work, with calling those voters, with talking to your family, with spending a couple of minutes to talk about it on social media, or spending the time to knock those doors, will we actually be able to win this election? And that's what's critical. Anything else, anything below that level, donate some money. Help someone else have the ability to do that. Sure. When we knock those doors, we drop off pieces of paper. Actually, there's one here. I'm going to throw it up just for our viewers. But there's literally pieces, that was upside down, pieces of paper.
Kind of sideways.
Yeah, it is kind of sideways. But we literally put pieces of paper in people's doors. And if this costs money, these aren't free. We ask union print shops to print these, who pay people a decent living, who actually respect designers and printers and other folks, and try to make it possible for people to live their lives. And we put messages on here, core messages, in English like this one, in Spanish like others in this office, and we try to get the word out about what Democrats actually believe and what values we can bring to the table. That all costs money. That's probably 25 cents sitting right there, just from that one printout. And we do that for 250,000 voters in Kalamazoo County. So when you donate to political parties, that's what you're funding. You're funding that literature. You're funding the time it takes to recruit volunteers, to bring people in. So if you can't speak up, if you don't feel safe at home talking about these values, if you don't feel like you can call voters, if you're nervous to knock doors, donate. Even $5. Even $5 would be 20 voters hearing from Democrats when
Really?
they wouldn't hear from us any other way.
$25 trans. Is that a direct translation?
$5 is 20 voters. That's a direct translation of my estimate that it's 25
That's your
cents.
estimate, right?
Yeah. There are cheaper versions of literature, but
No, that's
that one's
awesome.
kind of expensive.
That's awesome. So it sounds like the two steps people could make is that it's either one step outside their comfort zone or a donation.
Right.
Can really help the cause
Absolutely.
of electing Democrats.
Absolutely.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Justin. It's
course.
great to have you on this. All right, that's our show. I'd like to extend a thank you to Justin Mendoza for taking time out of his day to talk to us about democracy and the Democratic Party. If you enjoyed our show, please like, follow, and subscribe through whatever medium you're watching this on or listening to this on. And if you're interested, we would really appreciate any donations at kzoodems.com. That's KZOODEMS.com. Thank you so much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Inside Kalamazoo is a production of the Kalamazoo County Democratic Party in association with MIC Media. Recorded by Gavin Rance, Andy Allen, and Andrew Holt. Audio and video editing by Mike Ryder. Theme music by the Krellboys. Produced by Dakota Shapiro, Gavin Rance, and Mike Ryder.
So this flag doesn't have the red X across it. It's the right country, right? You have one of those flags with the little Christmas tree in the middle? Maybe it's an air freshener.